Hello and welcome to the second episode of our Django course. In the first episode, we built this app. So we have a admin dashboard. We write our authors, titles, and the text, and it just appears here. So to see that, we can go to admin page and I've logged in. And you can see inside our poems table, we have these two poems. So we have title, author, and content. The date is inserted automatically. Okay, now that we have this, we want to change some things. For example, if I click on about, I would like to be directed to the about page. Or if I click on this one, we're going to change these as well, like full text. Then I want a page to appear which has the full text of this. How can we do that? Well, let's go and make these changes. I'm going to stop the server by pressing Control C, and let's see what we got in here. Okay, so inside our home, here, inside our home page, there is this nav bar, the logo thing that if I click on them, it should take to the home page. But I can't just do something like this, like, I don't know, home. I don't want to hard code basically the URL. So what I can do is I can use this language that we just learned about in the previous section. That is, you can have a pair of curly braces and percentage signs to add some expressions there. And what Django provides is this URL and then single colons, because we have the double quotes here. So now we need to have single quotes here. And the name that we gave to this route, which is home. What name, you may ask? Well, if you go to the URLs, you see here we have this name home. And that is why we are going to use this to take us to this home page. So this URL home, if I save this and go back and refresh, well, I need to run the server first. So in the terminal, Python manage.py run server, everything looks good. So now when I click on this one, it takes me to the home page. Okay, now let's fix the thing with about. So I need to create an about page first. Inside a template here, I'm going to create an about.html. And I want the about.html to have the same navigation bar. So I'm going to copy everything up to the nav bar here. And then also all the way down to this footer, because I want every page to have the same nav bar and footer. And I also need some container here. Okay, so inside this, I'm going to have an h1 tag which says about page here. Okay, so this is a page that we have styled using Bootstrap, and it just says about page here. But we do not have any path for it, so we go to the views first to define the function that should return that page. And let's define it df, and well, not this one. It takes a request as a parameter, and it is, let's call it about. So this about is going to return render request, and it's going to return the about page, and we don't need these for now. So what it does is basically the same as before. So it takes an HTTP request and it returns this response, this about.html. So we should say now when someone goes to /about, this should be returned. We define that in the URL section right here. Let's have the same. Let's call it about. We give it the name of about. It's inside the same views folder. The function is called about, as you remember. So remember, it's called about. And if someone goes to the about, basically that function should run and that page should be returned. Okay, Now that we have this, let's see how it works. If I refresh and if I go to /about, it takes me to the about page. Header and footer are there. If I click on navbar, it takes me back. But if I click on about, doesn't happen. So I need to go to the home page, and where is the about thingy? In the navbar here, about. So what I did with the home page, the same thing I'm gonna do here with about, and I'm just gonna call it about. And let's get rid of this news for now. I'm not gonna make another page for it. Okay, so now let's save, Control S, go back, refresh, and you see it takes me to about, takes me to home page. Awesome. But what about these? So let's also fix this thing. I don't need these two links, maybe one link which would say full text, something like that. So let's go back here, and where is this? Okay, here I don't need two, I only need one, and this should say something like full text, for example. Okay, that should work, and full text, perfect, but it doesn't go anywhere, obviously. So before taking care of this full text thing, you have noticed that we've been copying and pasting all the same HTML code for homepage, and then for about page, and then if we have tens of other pages, it would be all the same. So what we can do is to define or create one page which holds all this shared code, and we use it as a template, and we pull on that code basically, so that we don't repeat this over and over again. That we are going to call base. You can call it whatever you want, but it's just convention, base.html. And what base.html is what every page on our website would have. And every page on our website would have at least up to navbar. It will be shared, so I'm going to paste it all in here. And maybe also the container part as well. So yeah, that as well, I guess. And then all the way here, we go to the footer, and this is also for the navbar. So we cut everything else and put it right here. So now we have a page which contains the code that every other page uses. So how do we inform other pages about the existence of this? What we use is extends function. So again, we are going to use the same language that we learned with curly braces and percentage signs, and we would say this page that you're in, the home page, is going to extend base.html. So it's going to extend that. That is, this is the minimum thing we have, and it's going to add to it these. But where should we add this? Where in this page, in this base, we should add those? We should specify it directly. We want it to be right inside this container. So, oops. Right here, we're going to say, this is how you specify that, by the way. So again, double curly braces and percentage sign. You would write block content, and you say end block content. So this means whenever someone is extending this base.html, put their content right here. Keep all that and put their content here. So use this template basically. And now we should specify, okay, the content that I want you to put there starts from here. So content is block content. So this is a block of content which starts here and it ends obviously all the way here, end block here. Okay. So now we should do the same thing with the about page. So we don't need any of these. So let's just get rid of all of it. and also the footer. Look, awesome. We only have now this part that we can use right here, and let's just call it end block. So you see how much better this is. Now if I go back to, and if I refresh, you see it still works the same. The styling is still there. Nothing has changed. But now everything is much, much better and smaller. Okay, so that's about extending. Now let's fix this issue with this full text. So when someone clicks on this, we should go to a page which shows the full text for this. But how do we know where we should go? How do we know that? Well, let's check with the URLs and we'll see here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to have another page. Let's just call it poems, for example. Yeah, so poems. And this poems is going to have different IDs. For example, poems ID 1 gives us the first poem. Poems ID 2 gives us the second poem. And the thing is, Django assigns these IDs automatically to every post that we make. So that is what we're going to use. And how we're going to make sure that we have the right thing, we say first it's going to be an integer. The ID is going to be a number so that people would not put some other things there manually. And it's going to be an ID, poem ID. Well, let's just call it ID. So now we have created this path of our website.com/poems/ID 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And here we also change the name to maybe poems detail or poem detail, because that's one poem now. And here we have poem underscore detail. So this is a function we're going to create now in the views. We don't have it yet. So let's go to the views and let's create that function right here. So def, not poem, but poem. Well, actually that could also be something. Poem detail is going to be, now this time it has two arguments. One is a request, just like the rest. Another is an ID. But what is this ID? The ID is basically whatever is inserted in the URL. That is website.com/poem underscore detail /2 or 3, whatever. So that's the ID. So now that we have access to the ID in the URL, we say, okay, the poem, not poems like this, is going to be, you are going to get, not all, you're going to get an object. From the objects, go get the one where the ID is the ID that the user gives you, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. So you're going to get the object with an ID of whatever the user says, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to create a context where poem is going to be poem, and the same thing. You're going to render the request and the poem detail HTML, which we don't have yet, and you provide the context as well. So again, let me say it again. So we have defined this function, poem detail. It's going to take a request and an ID. Where does the ID come from? Whatever the user clicks on. So let's go here. Where was that? Here. So for example, here would make sure that when the user clicks on the first poem, that is this one, then the ID of this, which is 1, will be inserted in the URL. And when that happens, that is poems 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. When that happens, this function is triggered, poem detail, And poem detail is going to take that ID that was in the URL, and it goes and grabs the object, the poem that has that ID, saves it, gives it to the context, and makes it available for our poem detailed page. Okay, so that's basically it. So now you know what works. But what happens if that ID does not exist? For example, if someone goes to, let's say, like poems, for example, 6, and it does not exist. You see, it says does not exist at poem 6. What if I say 1? It says still does not exist because still doesn't have access to this yet. So what if it goes somewhere that does not exist? What happens then? Well, for that, instead of this, I'm going to use another function which is called get. Let's see. Yes, get object or 404 or give an error. So if you have the poem with this ID, okay, get it. Get that poem. If you don't have it, then a 404 message, which means the object was not found or the page does not exist, that kind of stuff. Now, if we go here, we still see that template does not exist because we haven't got the poem detail HTML yet. So now, you see this is the template that should exist. So now we go back inside templates. We're going to create our poem underscore detail .html, and let's give it the same kind of skeleton as we did before here and down here. So now inside here, what we are going to put, because whatever comes here is the poem, and that poem here, that poem is available to us. A poem could be wind, could be love, could be whatever poem that we have posted. So we have access to the poem. So now, right there, let's have an H2, for example, which is, now this time we're using double curly braces because we're getting some values or variables here. And remember, I said we have access to poem. And now we want the poem title. And let's change this one to like H3. And instead of title, let's have an author now. And now this one. But here now we're going to have a p tag with the content. And maybe we can also have the date as well. Oops. Was it created at, I guess? Yes. So let's see if that is successful. So now I'm gonna go here. You look, humanity, John Donne, and this happened. If I put in like ID of 2, we have this. But if I go and put in ID of 3, it doesn't exist. So page not found 404. Awesome. So this works now. And what we need to do now is make sure that our page, when I click on this, it goes to that URL. So how do we do that? Okay, so now we need to get the URL. So we go to the models. Where is our models? Here. And here we're going to define a function. And that function is going to be a get, no, not this one, get absolute, come on, give it to me. Oh yeah, so we are going to get absolute URL. So this function enables us to basically to get to this URL by the ID. So now what we're gonna do is whenever I need to go to poems /2, 3, 4, whatever, it takes the ID of that object, whatever it is, and puts it after poems. And remember, in the URLs, we had poems and there was a number, this ID. Where does this ID come from? Comes from this ID of the same, that very object. So that's what happens. So this is one way of doing it. Another way is actually using a reverse function. So by reverse, give me some suggestions, please. So by reverse function, yes, it takes the name of that page, which is poem underscore detail, and remember, poem underscore detail is the name of this page. And then it takes some keyword arguments, for example, PK, which is basically the ID, could be the ID actually, it's the same. And it takes the ID and it puts it after this URL that is here. It's the same as the one that you saw before. The only difference is this one keeps the code dry. That is, you don't, if you want to change, for example, the path, that is, you want to change this path to poems, to something else, to prose or whatever else, it still works because the name is still the same. So if you change the path, still works, the name is still the same. And that's the reason that you have that, basically. Okay, so now we have access to the URL of every object, every poem, by this function of get absolute URL. So now what we can do is we can go back to, where was that? Home. And right here, for this href, we can put in the poem, which is being chosen, and we can get the absolute URL to that poem. And remember, the absolute URL to that poem consists of poems / whatever ID this poem has. So this should work. Now, if we go back and if I refresh this, okay, no error so far. So we have humanity, John Donne. Click on this and we get it. And wind, we get it. Okay, everything's working. That is amazing. All right, now the last thing that I would like to do is adding an excerpt to this to these cards. So I don't want the full text or the content to be shown here. I want an excerpt to be shown here, and then the full text should be shown when someone goes to the full page. So we need to add it to our models. Let's go to the models, and down here we are going to add an excerpt field, which is, yeah, like a text field. Now the issue is you can't just add it just like that. The reason is the previous ones, the previous posts like these two, did not have an excerpt. So what happens to them? Now what you can do is to say that it's fine if they did not have it. So you can set a null value to true and a blank value to true. That is, if it is null for them, it doesn't exist for them, still fine, no worries. So now that we've done these changes to the database, to the table, we need to, let's Control C, we need to make migrations, prepare these changes to be applied. So we use Python manage.py make migrations, and you can see that now add field excerpt to poem. So okay, we can add it by using migrate now. So Python manage.py migrate, and perfect, all is good. So now let's go back to our oops, I need to run server. Yes, everything good. Do that, perfect. Let's go to the admin page now, and here now we need to see we have an excerpt as well now, and this excerpt you can see is not as bold as others. It means it's not required, that is, it is optional. So I would add something like, okay, read the poem Wind by Robert Frost. This is an amazing poem. Okay, and then let's just add it here. I would say something like, you have read the poem blah blah, and yeah, that's basically it. Oops. So okay, let's go back. Let's see it again. Works. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it for which one? For the next one. For humanity as well. I'm just going to change this humanity and Robert Frost. Yeah, let's just keep it. It's fine. So read this poem by John Donne. Okay, that's it. Let's save this one. And now what I want to do is, well, let's add another poem. Let's call it third poem. Myself. Okay, this is my own poem. Blah, blah. Okay, so you are going to read my poem. Read it well, and that's it. So that would be saved. Okay, so we have 3 poems now. Now if I go to the page, to the website here, I should see these 3. But you can see the full text is here and it's too long, so I don't want the full text. I want the excerpt to be here, right? So let's do that in the code, in the home. In the home page, instead of the content, we want to add excerpt. Excerpt here, and we want to add the content to the this one, which, well, it is already added. So now if I go back and refresh, you would see that yes, we have the excerpt here and the full text is here. Another issue is that you can see, although we had some line breaks inside our admin, now we don't have those line breaks here. So what I can do, right after this content, I can add line breaks. This, so there's this bar and line breaks, and if I save it and go back, so you can see now it is formatted according to the way we did in the admin panel. And that's it for this second video. Okay, this is fully functional and it works. You can just need to add some styling to this, and then in a later video we'll talk about styling and how you can add images to, for example, a background here, or add some static files. That would be for the next video. Thank you very much for watching and listening.